Hi, I'm Demetre, and today we're going to talk a little bit about creature special effects in film. Now, special effects have always been a huge part of the allure of film, as many people view film as a form of escapism, and while I wouldn't argue that to be the case for every movie, the capacity to provide escapist entertainment is a large part of why film is such a popular and powerful medium. But what exactly is escapism? It's the act of escaping the real world and entering a new, fantastical, heightened reality. Paramount how film is able to achieve this is with special effects, and today we're going to explore one area of special effects, which is creatures. Now, creature special effects in film have existed for well over 100 years, but the methods of achieving these effects have drastically changed over time. I want to start off by looking at who is maybe the godfather of creature effects in film, and that would be Willis O'Brien. And Willis O'Brien was a pioneer in perhaps the most classic form of creature effects, which is stop motion. Now, many of you know stop motion because some notable films are built completely around it, such as The Nightmare Before Christmas, while some use it as a way to composite animation into live-action film. So stop motion, in essence, is the art of photographing a model and meticulously crafting their movements frame by frame to create the illusion of motion. Stop motion, used to be integrated in live-action film, is called model animation. And while stop motion animated films still exist, live-action films with model animation effects are nearly extinct today. But up until the 1970s, it was perhaps the most dignified and convincing way of presenting a creature on screen. Even after the 1970s, it continued to be used in a less popular capacity until CGI advanced in the early 1990s, namely with Jurassic Park. But we will get to that later. Willis O'Brien made his debut feature film with The Lost World, a silent dinosaur epic released in 1925. Though its special effects may seem crude by today's standards, I would argue that they still hold up. While the effects are not as convincing as modern CGI, they have an otherworldly, fantastical quality and are incredibly pleasing to watch. After the success of The Lost World came O'Brien's most famous and celebrated work, one of the most iconic films ever made, which is of course King Kong. Here, O'Brien perfected his craft, using a juxtaposition of different techniques within a single shot. Take this shot for example, where Kong pushes the sailors off the log. This scene uses what's called the Williams process, where several different elements of the frame are shot separately, such as the foreground, the background Kong animation, and the actors on the log, and then are scanned through an optical printer, which is a movie camera hooked up to a projector. And this consolidates the various elements into one single image. This shot alone is a milestone in film special effects and is insanely impressive given the technical limitations of the time. As mentioned earlier though, King Kong used several different techniques and thus was not purely reliant on stop motion for portraying Kong. For close-up shots where Kong interacts with the actors, or just close-ups on Kong's face, a large-scale animatronic head and hand were created. This allowed the audience to see Kong from several different points of view, which makes him that much more of a compelling and believable character. There's a reason why they are still making Kong films today. After the release of King Kong, a young boy named Ray Harryhausen became inspired by Willis O'Brien's groundbreaking effects and set out to make films in the same fashion. After working as an assistant to Willis O'Brien on Mighty Joe Young, another giant ape film with amazing model animation, Harryhausen became perhaps the most well-known stop-motion animator in the history of creature features. His work is very much founded in the techniques of Willis O'Brien, but Harryhausen brought them to the next level. For example, Harryhausen would animate his creatures against a sheet of glass oftentimes, in order to diffuse the light, which made the lighting on the stop-motion creatures better match the actors. Harryhausen's primary stop-motion technique was called dynamation, and it was all about compositing different background and foreground elements into one shot, much like with King Kong. However, Harryhausen would split the live-action footage into two separate layers, a foreground and a background. He would then animate the creatures against the background layer while blocking out the areas of the frame which would be affected by the foreground. This technique of blocking out areas of the picture is called matting. Finally, Harryhausen would rewind the film and matte out everything except for the foreground, so that the foreground layer could be superimposed onto the image. This effect is that the image would blend seamlessly with the combination of so many moving layers. On top of Harryhausen's amazing use of compositing, the designs, movements, and personalities of his creatures were perhaps his greatest trademark. Especially in films such as 20 Million Miles to Earth or The Valley of Gwangi, the creatures come to life with such vivid and nuanced personalities that it continues to impress even if the effects aren't as seamless or believable as what we have today. Another important technique is that of suitmation, which is a technique primarily used for Japanese monster films known as kaiju films. This technique began with Japan's first monster movie, Godzilla, or known as Gojira in Japan, from 1954. And here, Eiji Tsuburaya built and designed a large rubber suit that an actor would wear. The actor would then interact with miniature models in order to show Godzilla's destructive power. Director Ishiro Honda wisely shot Godzilla from low angles to properly convey his size. This would also help draw attention away from the fact that Godzilla was a guy in a suit destroying miniatures, as scale is the key to believability in creating good monster effects. At times, the suitmation footage would also be composited into the backgrounds of live-action footage, in a similar process to Ray Harryhausen. Even King Kong went through his share of suitmation films, with the 1976 remake using special effects man Rick Baker in a Kong suit with animatronic features in his face. This film also attempted to use a 40-foot-tall animatronic Kong for certain wide shots, and that didn't exactly work out. These techniques continued to persist into the 80s, with animatronic monsters becoming common. However, animatronics have always worked for close-ups of the monster, as even modern creature features use this technique. Wide shots, however, are the bigger issue, it seems. Some films were still using stop motion for their wide shots, among other techniques, but thanks to George Lucas and ILM, a new process came about. With the release of Jurassic Park, the industry was changed forever. And not many people know this, but Jurassic Park initially was going to use stop motion for the dinosaurs' more complex movements, but computer technology caught up just in time for the team to use it in the film. Jurassic Park introduced fully computer-generated dinosaurs that interacted seamlessly with the actors. Wide composite shots were no longer limited to the static role they always seem to have in model animation, and could be much more dynamic and fluid. However, Jurassic Park, like King Kong before it, is so impressive because of the way it seamlessly blends different techniques of special effects, in this case both practical and computer-generated. Close-ups of the T-Rex, or the Velociraptors, were done practically with animatronics, and once again this hybrid technique is very much indebted to King Kong. Although the effects are far more refined and believable in Jurassic Park, it goes to show the ingenuity of Willis O'Brien and his team in 1933 that there are films today that are still using their ideas. In the last 30 years, CGI has become the standard for creatures in film. And while some films still have practical monster effects, think Disney Star Wars, a new digital technique has enticed a lot of filmmakers, that being motion capture. Motion capture is the act of capturing an actor's performance on camera in a special effects suit, and then using the information from the actor's performance to create a digital character. We come full circle now, as King Kong in 2005 famously used extensive motion capture, done by the master of the technique, Andy Serkis. Watching scenes of the 1933 and 2005 King Kong films is a great exercise, as it not only demonstrates the love and affection director Peter Jackson has for the film, but also how the same basic story is executed so differently with different creature effects. Special effects can steal the show, but many would argue they shouldn't. Special effects are a storytelling tool and should serve the purpose of making the reality the film takes place in feel all the more three-dimensional, tangible, and real. Good special effects can bring an idea to life for an audience, and the technology doesn't have to limit the effect. If a creature effect is great, it will stand the test of time. Films like King Kong or Jason and the Argonauts still feel real within the world they inhabit, although their special effects look so distant from what we're used to. Even the best of technology is not timeless, but good special effects can be.